Welcome to the Personality Playbook, How to Navigate Conflict with Diverse Personalities. My name is Stephanie Licata. I'm the Senior Learning Strategist at Cloverleaf. My background is in organizational psychology, and I work with teams and organizations to create workplaces that work for everyone. We're going to talk about, is it really conflict? Sometimes we perceive that something is going to be a conflict, but it's really just a difficult conversation. It's a challenging conversation. We're also going to talk about how you identify your own conflict types. And we're mixing 3 different assessments, which if you haven't taken them all, that's okay. If you have, great. We're going to look at 16 types, or some of you may know it as Myers-Briggs, DISC, and we're going to look at Enneagram. And so you're going to be able to identify your most natural conflict type. Now, you may, as we go through these conflict types, you may see yourself in more than one. That's okay, right? You may also see yourself in different situations where you show up as one or the other. That's okay too. So you're going to have the opportunity to identify your conflict type. Then you're going to have the ability to actually talk about the conflict type that actually challenges you. So as we go through the conflict types, you want to be listening. What's my type? And who's somebody that I know with this type that maybe I have a problem with, or a challenge with, or I have a difficult time with when we have to have difficult conversations. So I want you to consider, is it really conflict, right? When we think about conflict, sometimes just what we imagine in our minds about having a certain conversation, it sometimes outweighs what's actually happening. So we really have to ask ourselves and challenge ourselves, is it really conflict, or is this just a challenging communication that I need to have to resolve something that's really important with a member of my team, or even a member of someone else's team? Maybe it's a cross-functional relationship. Many of us come to our workplaces with our own conflict story, right? So if you had to say in one word, when you think of conflict, if you had to say in one word, the first word that comes to mind, what would you say that is? Pop that in the chat. What's the one word that comes to your mind when you think of workplace conflict? Just one word, sum it up. Uncomfortable, disagreement, strong disagreement, disagreeable, frustrating, miscommunication, tense, upset, anxiety, stress. So all these things come to mind. We sometimes will recall our past experiences with conflict, disruptive, okay, right? We kind of always see conflict as this negative thing. However, if you really look at the research, right, the highest performing teams actually allow themselves to engage in healthy conflict, right? Task conflict as opposed to personal conflict. All those words you just described are usually associated with personal conflict. We don't want to have to give some feedback to somebody. Is it really conflict, or do we have to deliver that critical feedback and we don't want to hurt someone's feelings, right? Do we need to share stakeholder or customer feedback? Maybe we're in the middle. Maybe a customer or a client has told us something and we have to deliver feedback about that, whatever that client has said or customer has said, or that stakeholder has said, to a member of our team, right? Whether it's a peer or a direct report. Is it conflict, or do we just have to share some departmental or role changes and we're nervous about what the fallout could be, and we know that people don't like change, right? Is it conflict, or is it just one of these types of conversations? Or do we have to correct a mistake, right? I'm going to give you a really, really strong tip. When someone makes a mistake, right? And you can write this down if you want, because it's not in the resource. It's a little tip. If someone makes a mistake, I'm going to invite you, before you explain or train, coach. Before you explain or train, coach. And what does that mean? It means ask a question. So before you start to correct the mistake by telling someone what to do, you want to ask one question. So help me understand what happened here. Help me understand what your thinking was. And when you ask before you explain or train, you actually reduce, right, some of the tension, because tension was one of the things that came up, right? You reduce some of that tension, you reduce some of that anxiety, because you come with a question, you come seeking to learn rather than explain and train, right? As leaders, as people that manage departments or projects, we're very good at explaining and training. We're not good at learning sometimes and reminding ourselves to learn, right? Because we're human, we have stuff to do, right? Is it conflict, or do we just have to clarify expectations after a misunderstanding? Sometimes we need to just clarify that we've thought someone thought A, but really B happened, and we have to clarify that, right? And maybe that person doesn't even realize what went wrong, and that feels like it could turn into conflict. So, is it conflict, or is it something else? So, what other interactions do you file under conflict? Pop it in the chat. What other interactions do you file in under conflict? Disagreement, differing agendas or values, stating boundaries, silence, right? We're not communicating, misalignment in thought process, egos involved, personal relationships, timelines, disagree on a decision, personality clashes. So these are some things to keep in mind as we go through the different conflict types. Now, one of the things that helps with conflict is simple preparation. Preparation is everything. And so, one of the awesome things that we here at Cloverleaf do is actually give you an opportunity, right, to prepare better for conflict, right? And sometimes that's just as simple as logging into my Cloverleaf and asking myself, how can I navigate conflicts with, let's see, who am I going to pick? With Scott. And so even if I just take 5 minutes to prepare, and those of you who are not Cloverleaf users, what these are coaching insights. So as a result of the assessments that you've taken, Cloverleaf will aggregate these, right, and give you all of these different tips that allow you to reflect, to take action. And now I can actually understand exactly how I can navigate conflict with Scott. We take all that really interesting assessment data that's been really interesting for years and we make it useful. So we're going to be using 16 types, which talks about personal preferences and really was developed in the fields of psychology. We're going to talk about Enneagram, how our core values have shaped our beliefs, our responses to others. It'll describe patterns in how people interpret the world and manage their emotions. We're going to also factor in DISC, which measures personality traits to help understand behavior in the workplace. So if you haven't taken all of them, that's completely okay. The behaviors we describe will start to help you identify a different conflict type or a person you associate with that type. So all of the conflict types go on this continuum of task-oriented and relationship-oriented. So for example, as we go into these, the warrior, right, is high on task orientation, very focused with getting something done, and low on relationship orientation. So I am going to bring on my colleague, Peggy, to start with the warrior. So tell us a little bit about the warrior, Peggy.
Okay, the warrior, which is really high task orientation, they love action. They are very excited to get moving and get going, and they are maybe really open to conflict and potentially could be received as confrontational by other people because they see it as just a means to get things accomplished. They're so motivated to accomplish tasks. They may not always pay attention to some of the relational impact to their desire to get things done. You might be able to observe those traits in an Enneagram 8, which loves action and is comfortable with movement and getting things started, with D in dominance on the disc, and with extroversion and judgment on 16 types. They might even show up and get things moving, and they have a desire to uh, resolve situations. So they want to check the box, they want to get to the finish line, and they want to clear the task or the project off of their to-do list. So how you might see them show up in your work is they are using lots of sports analogies, and they are giving you trade-offs. If we don't do this, and then we'll need to do that. We've got to come to a decision. They create a lot of pressure around decisions because they are feeling that pressure internally. It is crunch time for them. They have got to get moving, and they actually feel a release of the internal pressure when they get to move. They don't necessarily need it to be the most right or the perfect decision. What they need is to be in action on it.
Mhm.
So the bottom line is this is what's so is for them what's true in that moment for them to get moving.
Mhm.
And you can see them because they love action. They love to rally the troops, and they might expect you to reciprocate your agreement or your disagreement verbally back to them. Your silence towards them could be received as agreement with whatever it is that they're pitching or trying to get everyone motivated and bought in on.
So as you look at the warrior, think about, is this your type, right? Is this another type that you engage with, right? Now, remember, every type also can be effective in different situations. So, for example, Peggy, would you say like the warrior could almost be effective when there is a critical decision that needs to be made and time is of the essence, and even maybe people's safety or there's a big fallout if we don't make a decision.
Warriors can be really decisive. They can get people moving. They can get things started. They are often comfortable taking a leadership role.
Mhm.
And they are great in sales because when obstacles come their way, they do not feel defeated by those obstacles. They see them as just another thing to overcome.
Mhm.
So they have a great role on the team. You just want to be thoughtful about making sure that they're in the right role so that they are as productive for the team as possible.
Sometimes, and if you look in the resource and you understand a little bit about the motivation about all this, you can start to understand how to interact. Right now, we're going to go through and actually do a little bit of a conversation about how you can interact with each one. But right now, we're going to continue with the type. So still be thinking of, is this a type that I am, and or is this a type that I engage with a person who's like this? All right, so I'm going to go into the accommodator. So the accommodator might be an Enneagram 2 or 9. Twos and nines may be interested in kind of moving through the problem to make it go away entirely. They really prefer to focus on the good in others. They want to draw out people they truly enjoy. For the two, they really enjoy people seeing people fulfilled. And also for the nine, they like to stay in harmony. They're satisfied regardless of the outcome. So these are our peacekeepers. These are the people that, again, are others focused, right? Now, they also might be an high S and also F on 16 types. So the S and the F are aware of their environment. They see details, but the details are more related to the relational energy as opposed to data, right? So they see the dynamics between people that are happening, right? They would address the factors that they can control and take care of, right? If they don't feel like they can control something, they're not going to want to step and tip their toe into that water. They may even prefer to lay low, right? Or stay off the radar in an attempt to minimize pain or discomfort, right? They also may be a high S on disc, and an S is sensitive to energy and like the current vibe. And they pick up on people's responses, needs, and desires. They'll quickly sense, is there harmony missing? Is there cohesiveness missing? And they want to restore it. So they may rush in during conflict also to help if someone was getting the short end of the stick. So what you might hear an accommodator say is, well, it's not an issue now. Can we just push through as is and it will be okay, right? Are you getting everything you need, right? We're really accommodating. Is this something we absolutely need to deal with now? Now, when this type can be effective is also when you don't have the right people to make the decision and or to engage in the conflict. There's critical people or roles that are not there, so these people can be helpful in understanding when we do need to actually wait or gather some different people to have a more productive conversation. And again, there's no good or bad type, right? Again, there's situations where the type can be highly effective. Right, Peggy, back to you with the escape artist.
So these are the folks that do not love stepping into the conflict. Enneagram fives, for example, they have a wealth of knowledge and they can often see conflict as just a total drain on their resources. So they don't want to spend their personal, intellectual, relational capital on having this conflict. So they are going to take a step back and let the fight play out, and then they'll show up at the end when a decision's made and see what they can do to solve a problem with everyone. Or the high introverted thinking, What they want to do is go solve the problem with the knowledge that they hold already. So they are watching the conflict, which is can be exhausting for them and really emotionally taxing and energy draining. And they will want to start thinking through solutions for what the problem is at hand. So they are also looking to solution. And then high on conscientiousness, they can feel like having relational conflict is predatory to their efficiency on getting a task done excellently and getting it done in a timely manner. So all of them, they have a high value on getting things done, or they have a high value on solving a problem and using knowledge to solve the problem. So some of the conflict that they may feel like is happening relationally, that is not necessarily their highest value or their highest gifting. And so that's not something they want to lean into because it takes an additional energy for them. So on the team, they might show up and they say, it doesn't matter, let it ride, it's not worth it. And what that is saying is like, it's not worth it to me. It may be worth it to you. I'll intervene when you're done, when it is worth it for me to offer a solution. I can't work like this. They might say that, and they more likely they're not going to. They'll just lean back and let the conflict take place because they feel like, what's the point? I'm going to become exhausted. And these people are the ones that really care about having this back and forth. I just want to find a solution. Let me know when you've decided what your back and forth is drawing a conclusion to. And then most likely for these types, they're not going to have a response. So on your team, what you will want to do to make sure you're getting their input, a lot of these types have a ton of knowledge that you want to be drawing into both your problem and your solution before you move on to activation. You want to get that input. So you do need to ask them for feedback. And if you can keep emotions at an even state, it makes it a lot safer for them to engage.
And this type can also be effective when there's too much back and forth, right? And there's too much going on. And then, like you said, we now go and ask this type for feedback. They can actually help center the group again on what's important if there's too much drama, right?
Yeah, because that's not
Right.
going to be something they'll engage in.
Right.
So
They're
they'll
not
say,
they're not into it. They're not going to that party.
yes. All right. And now moving forward, what are we going to do?
All right. So our last type is the win-win. Now they may be an Enneagram 3 that threes want to achieve by focusing on efficiency to get goals accomplished. And they're interested in being perceived as capable in the eyes of others. So they're also interested in like, we're all going to have success together. They may ask more than they tell in challenging conversations because they generally want to learn and they want to help people be successful. They may be a ID on disc where IDs are equally committed to outcomes as they are with maintaining relationships. They're equally committed to outcomes as they are with maintaining relationships and connections. They really want to get things done, but they use the relationship as leverage to do that, right? They'll invest more time in collaborating. So the win-win will spend a lot of time dissecting what's going on and collaborating towards a solution, right? They may also be an N on 16 types. They're looking to the future. They're looking to leverage opportunities. And even if something hasn't existed before, they'll want to design it, right? They're more comfortable stepping into the unknown and they'll want to design it together. They want that collaboration. They see conflict as access to innovation. They may not love it, but they will find value in it. They'll know that they'll see the future, that there's a better outcome. So they might say things like, what do you think about it? How would you change it? Right? Or I'd like to discuss this project with you, but first I'd like to get your perspective on things. What do you see as the best case scenario here? Or do you have any other questions? Right? So again, these are really strong collaborators. They're leveraging conflict as a source of creativity and innovation. They can be highly effective when you have time, when you have a lot of time, when collaboration and cohesiveness is necessary for the type of outcome that you're looking to create. Now that we've gone through all these and we realize that we went through it a little bit quickly, right? We have some questions for you. Pick any one of these questions to speak to. Which type do you most closely identify with and why? How can you lean into the strengths of your type in future challenging conversations? Or what gaps do you need to fill given your conflict type? So, if one question's kind of calling to you, I want to invite you again, if you want to share in the chat, you can share in the chat.
I was going to share a story or how I showed up warrior with some folks and they were like, it's too much. I really need you to tone it down because I feel like I can't tell you bad news because you get too intense and I need you to stay steady and even. And those folks are probably in between accommodator and escape artist. That is my biggest work is in that relationship is to stay so steady and unemotional so that they
Mhm.
will continue sharing and saying the things.
Mhm.
And I'm also not great at it.
It's practice, right? It just takes a
Mm.
lot of practice, right?
Yeah, like it when I'm disappointed, that is even too much emotion for
Mm.
them. So like it needs to I have asked like, do I need to channel my inner robot? And I'm like, would
Right,
appreciate. So yeah, that has been something where people have said, "Warrior's a little extra for me.
right,
Can you go a little more accommodator?"
right. That's great. Well, answer one of these questions. Which conflict type do you struggle with the most and why? What's one thing you could do differently to engage with a person of this conflict type? And what do you need to practice not doing with this conflict type? What's the insight from that conversation that you walked away with? Anything you learned?
One of our, because we had lots of accommodators and just like one kind of warrior, but we did acknowledge that like the accommodators can become warriors too when our sense of injustice or justice is activated, when we feel like somebody's getting railroaded and not everybody's getting to have input. We can like jump, like we don't really care about the outcome, but we do care that everyone gets to be involved in the outcome.
Mm.
And so we can get warrior mode too. But Miyuki said that it would really help if the accommodators would let the warriors know that the timeline matters to us too, that we
Yeah.
care about getting things done as well. And I thought that's going to be a rich one that I take back with me and try to make sure I'm clear about like, I understand we're working with a deadline. I want to get things done too.
Avoiding conflict actually creates more worse conflict. And that's the purpose of this. We really want you to be able to create a sense of community and understanding that everywhere people work, where they're humans, they deal with this stuff, right? Everywhere there's a group of people, these dynamics show up, whether it's a work team, a volunteer team, the school PTA, whatever it is. You bring a bunch of humans together and you're going to see all this interaction. Also, if you are a Cloverleaf user and you haven't seen some of our new features, I'm just going to pop this on here. You now have reflections where you can actually get coached and get your automated coaching and actually answer some of your coaching tips and save some development areas for yourself, right? So if you haven't tried reflections, you want to be using that. It's super effective way to give yourself development each day. Peggy, anything else you want to share in closing?
All of your coaching tips do address each of the different ways your personality type could encounter a conflict. And also, if you did the side-by-side comparison that you are going to have on dashboard, that is going to give you an idea of how you might have counter processes and goals and conflict potential with teammates, and they can give you good watch outs for that.
Let us know in the comments which part of this video helped you the most, and be sure to grab your free guide that's linked in the description. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.